Hope everybody's doing well. This is Andrew, and I am joined with a good friend of mine, Matt Marino. Now, for this identity based discipleship class, one of the things that we see based out of who we are is a desire, a pull from Christ to tell others who he is, to spread that glory. It's a part and parcel. It is part and parcel with us following him as his kids. So before we jump into interviewing Matt, would you mind just sharing with all the viewers here who you are and where you are in this world?
Easier said than done after you started off right before with Wayne's World quips. So I'm sitting here trying hard not to laugh my face off. Thanks, Andrew, for nothing.
That's fine. That's fine. Wayne's World.
I'm Matt Marino. I'm an Episcopal priest in St. Augustine, Florida, at Trinity Parish, which is about to have its bicentennial anniversary. 1821.
That's insane.
That's been around for more than a hot minute.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been there now how many years?
Oh, like 18 months.
18 months. Okay. Has it seriously only been 18 months? Wow.
Yeah. The whole world stopped. Well, it depends. If you count the decade that is COVID, then I've been there 11 and a half years.
Oh, perfect. Yep. I can see it. You've aged some extra gray hairs. So
yeah, true. A little jowlier.
Yeah. Well, so for those who are joining us, there's a series of 3 interviews that we are going to be doing, Michael and I, and we're going to bring in people that we think are actually not, I'm not trying to say Matt is the embodiment, the height of all humanity in being an evangelist and sharing Jesus with others. I'm not about to accuse him of that, but the truth of the matter is, Matt and I have been friends. We actually go back quite a few years, and I have seen God work through him, obviously prior to our meeting, but while we have been friends, to continue to chase after people and help equip them to share Christ, because Matt is always talking about Jesus. He is always telling other people about Jesus. And then he's actually sought out programs and organizations to be a part of to continue to do that. So Matt, let me
You're really saying that I stalk people with the gospel. Is that...
Well, I wouldn't say it's that strong, but it's pretty solid. So for you then, Matt, since I'm just kind of puffed you up a little bit and said that you love evangelism, why do you see evangelism as an important part of being a disciple?
I don't know. Maybe I just can't help myself. Part of it is that watching someone discover Jesus is like crack for Christians. You get a little bit of it and you just want more. What are you smoking? You meeting the Lord? So,
yeah.
After a while, you just watch people, like the lights come on and you go, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I just want to do more of this. It's such a gift.
Okay, so there is an experiential thing to you personally, and there's the experiential aspect too of somebody else coming to know Christ, and you kind of, again, watching those lights come on. Is there any other part for you that beyond the experience and knowing somebody else has it now? What other aspects of evangelism do you see as necessary?
It is sort of like, it's but by the way, this is where I think Calvinists miss it, is that I think that that election isn't about, I get to be part of the cool group who gets to go to heaven and those guys don't. Nanner sucks to be you. I think what Calvinism gets right is, I've been given the baton of election, and my job now is to pass it on to you. And being part of knowing that the Holy Spirit is working through you to pass on the gift of election to another is just amazing. It's an amazing thing. And I remember being a lonely high school atheist way before it was cool to be a high school atheist. Like now that's trendy. Everybody wants to be a high school atheist or somehow LGBT. It's really cool if you're in high school now to be LGBT, but before those things were cool, I was a high school atheist. And I remember sitting alone at night and looking up at the acoustic bumps on my ceiling after a night of drinking because I didn't know what else to do with my time. And I just remember sitting there watching the acoustic bumps kind of panning in my buzz and going, is this all there is to life? There's got to be more than this. And I just remember the aching feeling of some voice somewhere saying, no, man, this is all there is. And I didn't know there was an enemy to our souls. But after meeting the Lord, I did. And I realized that was not the voice of God. And it wasn't even the voice of me. That was the voice of one trying to shipwreck many. And so just having known what it is to be without Christ, how could I not want someone else to know what it is to have him? The experience of forgiveness and reconciliation with God, how can I not want as many as possible to experience that?
And so based out of, again, this great joy and this experience that we have to be in the presence of God, to be in the presence of God and feel whole and fulfilled and complete. Like, in a way, you don't want to wish the opposite on your worst enemy because like the opposite is just to be broken, to remain distant. You want to do all you can to obliterate whatever obstacle that there is, to have somebody to see Jesus, to know him. Now, Matt, you're not new at this. What do you say to the people that don't think a disciple really needs to have evangelism in their life? Okay, good answer.
John 21, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. Yeah.
We see that, like, as Matt's beautifully saying, it's so funny, I think I just referenced that verse in a sermon I preached, that the truth of the matter is Jesus was sent, and he's like, okay, now you're mine, you're in my image, you reflect me, you get to do what I do because you're mine and because you're my kids. Go, do. I'm sending you. This is part and parcel. As I said earlier, this is who you are. Now get after it. So I'm not saying that we should accuse or call names on this recording, but how strong of a faith would you say people have that don't see evangelism or spreading God's glory or telling others about it, that it's an option as opposed to something more intrinsic to us? Well,
did we actually say that?
I guess the better question is, what speaks louder, your words or your actions? And so maybe the better question is, how many people do we know that kind of live like that that claim Christ?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's the, like I'm at a church where a lot of folk retired to Florida, didn't know anybody else, and so they joined a church for social connections. So they literally just don't know any non-Christians. Like we're going through this with the whole racial reconciliation, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter movement thing. And the encouragement is, hey, in the early church, the thing that distinguished the early church was that everyone was welcome, and they broke down every social and cultural barrier to the point where they were mocked by calling them, oh, look at the little Christs. Aren't they cute? Pat them on the head, keep them from doing this dangerous multi-ethnic, multi-social class, multi-generational thing they're doing. And the challenging our folk, go have a friend who doesn't look like you. they honestly don't know anyone who doesn't look like them. So they have to create all new friendships around the gospel. So the beautiful thing for us coming out of the conflicts of the summer is that it's really encouraging our people to go have friendships outside of the body of Christ. And so I think a lot of times it's that we just have so surrounded ourselves as Christians with a world where everyone is speaking the same Jesus language we are, or at least we think they are.
And that's huge. And that's a very important reminder too, even for me, as I phrase this question, is that it's not as black and white. You can't accuse everybody of their intentions or their motives. Sometimes they just don't know people.
Yeah. So no, we've never seen a motive, but a lot of times it's just people haven't intentionally made friendships outside of themselves. We were called to go and make disciples of all nations. And if the only nation is other, presuming you're people that look like you and I, if the only people are other white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, then it's tougher. We need some friends like us.
So if we're out and we're making friends that don't look like us, what are, from your personal experience, what are some of those must have or must be passed on things for a disciple to do or say to others so that evangelism is occurring? What are those musts in an evangelistic either conversation, presentation, however you want to phrase it?
Is what you're asking, like, what's the lowest bar of what constitutes the gospel? Is that the question?
Let's answer that one first, and then let's go with ideal.
Well, there are some basic things like, God exists, loves us unconditionally, and wants us to know him, Genesis 1, and God expressed his love through Jesus, the perfect God-man, John 1:1 and 1:14 and John 3:16. And sin is us intentionally turning from God and making ourselves the boss of our own life. You're not the boss of me, I am. Christ died for our sins, Romans 5. Christ rose from the dead as proof sin is forgiven. God calls us to turn to him and offer our lives to him in response to his love, John 1:12 and 13. Those are kind of basic things that for those in the audience that are like the highly churched, I'm heading for ministry, like you've got all those verses probably memorized. But I think the biggest thing for regular Joes, like right. for ordinary people, I think have a couple of tools so that when someone gives you an opportunity when someone asks you to talk about the gospel, you're ready to go. And for me, two of those tools that are really good are one of them is one verse evangelism. And that's a tool put together by, oh my gosh, what was that guy's name?
I'll look it up while you're talking, okay?
So one verse evangelism was put together by an InterVarsity guy, I think. And basically, it's just Romans 6:23. And whenever someone comes up with something about how stupid Christianity is, or can you believe stupid Christians think that? And it gives you a chance to go, it's interesting. People think Christians are anti-science. Do you know what Christians actually believe? And they go, well, I know they love the Bible and whatever. Like, if you have 10 minutes, I can draw a picture on a napkin in 10 minutes that will explain what it is that Christianity teaches. And it has nothing to do with whatever you just brought up. You got 10 minutes. And mostly people will go, sure, I got 10 minutes, go ahead. And you basically get them to talk about, Romans 6:23, using kind of the Grand Canyon analogy and the Christ bridging the gap. That's one. Another one is Steve Chung's now that guy was InterVarsity, Steve Chung's Four Circles Evangelism. It's called Based on a True Story. And I think he wrote it in a book called, like he took his little seminar and he wrote it in a book called True Story, A Christianity Worth Believing In. And that's one where it's the same kind of picture on a napkin. And in 10 minutes, when someone talks about how screwed up something is in the world, and the beauty with this is they can use anything at all. Like, can you believe how stupid Republicans are or how stupid Democrats are? Like, it doesn't matter which side of a cultural divide they pick. You can say, it's interesting that you would say that because that comes out of our fact that we were designed for good. And so the four circles of Steve Chung's Four Circles Evangelism are that we're designed for good. And that's why all of us have this sense of justice that we know the way things ought to be, and we know that they're not the way they were designed. And so his four circles are designed for good, damaged by evil, restored for better, and sent forth to serve. And out of almost any conversation you have with someone who doesn't know the Lord, you can get launched straight into a conversation about the goodness of God and his desire for them.
So to answer your query, it was Navigators, and at least the information I saw was Randy Raisbrook.
Yes. Yeah. Randy Raisbrook. That's who it is.
So that's the one verse evangelism.
So Navigators, Randy Raisbrook on one verse evangelism, and InterVarsity, the Based on a True Story by Steve Chung, Choung. Is my rainstorm? Can you hear that?
It's in the background. It's fine.
We're getting torn up here.
That's okay. It's not a hurricane. So
hey, let me just say the reason why I think if you're a follower of Jesus, you should do evangelism and not wait for your pastor to do it. It is way easier to say, hey, my pastor's doing this thing. Come check it out. We do this evangelism thing. Come check it out. When in my experience with evangelism over 30 years on Young Life staff, running youth camps for 30 years, both in the church and for Young Life, and in church planting and being a member now of a 200-year-old church. So from church we started to 200-year-old church and kind of everything in between, of the I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 people I've seen somewhere in my Christian life make a commitment to Jesus. 75% of them have done it in a large group. 20% of them have done it in a small group of 40 or less, and 2% have done it one-on-one. Now, before you say, I should stop doing this, I should stop doing one-on-one and just bring everybody to my church, let me talk to you about the follow-through I've seen 1 year later. Because if someone makes a commitment to the Lord, I kind of want to follow up with them and see how they're doing. And what I found is in large group, people who make a commitment to the Lord in the mega environment, a year later, over 30 years, I've been able to track less than 10% of them following through, sometimes as low as 1% of them that I know they're still walking with the Lord. In a small group, it's about 50-50. In one-on-one, 85% of the people that I've seen come to faith through a one-on-one sharing experience are still walking with the Lord a year later. And if more Christians were doing one-on-one evangelism, we would leverage the power of relationship in the gospel. I think Tim Keller said there are three things that someone needs in order to make a decision to follow Christ. They need a plausible explanation. I'm gonna butcher this, but
that's fine.
Some version of a plausible explanation of the gospel. Like, we need to answer the questions, but they need to have a relationship with a Christian where they have someone that they can go to and be in relationship with. And they need to have a group of people that are like peers that they can see coherently walking this out in their life. That they have to have a coach and a community. And somewhere along the line, if if you have both a coach and a community, you do pretty well. And that's where one-on-one really helps you, because you're in relationship with the coach from the start.
Okay, so you've given us, there's two things that you've shared which are great for one-on-one. Again, Napkin Theology, being able to go out, engage your friend, talk with them, work. Hopefully it's a relationship. It's not accosting somebody. Hey, do you want to see these 4 circles?
Although there have been plenty of times when someone has just gone, like someone will be jabbering, next to me and, nudge me over a beer and go, yeah, did you hear that thing that preacher said? Can you believe Christians? It's actually not what Christians believe. And it starts a conversation, and 20 minutes later, I'm borrowing a pen from the guy.
Right. And that's a natural conversation, right? That's not, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you didn't accost the man. You didn't stop him while he was having his beer and saying, can you put that beer down? Because I have something important to tell you.
Dude, I got a message for you.
Yeah, it's going to change your world. And so it is going to change his life. I believe it. I believe it's the most important thing. But there's something a bit more natural in a conversation or a relationship where that's going to fall. Now, please don't hear me. I know that in America right now and in the West, the age of handing tracts out to people has probably come and gone. I'm not saying they're entirely ineffective, but I'm saying they are not as effective as they once were. Other countries...
I've never seen anyone meet the Lord because of a tract, but that's just me.
And I think because Christianity is very much part of the cultural milieu. It's even if you don't know it, you think you know it. And so the information in there only is going to feed, if you're not a believer, it's going to feed your dislike or feed your assumptions about Christians and Christianity. But other countries where it's not known, it might have a place. I will leave that conversation to other brothers and sisters who are in other countries. But today, Matt and I are talking about, specifically in evangelism, again, you talked about the benefit and the wisdom of one-on-one evangelism. What is another method that meets more of that group evangelism type thing that you were talking about?
We're doing a small group thing right now. We're doing Alpha as a way to put people in groups. And we're using it with the combination of lifelong Christians and complete newcomers. We've got Jewish people in the group, and we've got completely unchurched people in the group. And
so explain to other people, what is Alpha?
I mean, I think Alpha is Young Life for grown-ups. So if you know what Young Life is, that makes sense. But Alpha is a series of 12 videos that explain the basics of the Christian life, so that you can, and it does it in a very natural way. Like it's got these 12 videos that were filmed around the world with there's like these 2 co-hosts, and they go around documentary style interviewing people on the street in like all the coolest cities in the world about what do you think about God. And that gives them permission to, launch into, here's what the Christian faith is all about. And that then sets up small group meetings in your area. In our case, we're doing the entire thing on Zoom. So we've got 75 people right now meeting in, I think in like 10 Zoom rooms, 8 Zoom rooms. I don't know. Yeah, 8 Zoom rooms. So we watch the video together. We have some kind of warm up stuff and, get to know you stuff, and watch the video and then have conversations. And it's been really powerful so far. We're 4 weeks into it.
So how do you then leverage these online conversations? Like, I guess what's the natural on-ramp for a believer to invite a non-believer to this? What is it about Alpha that seems like, yeah, I'll give it a go?
I mean, I think most of this is the arm twisting of friends. Hey, I've got this thing. It's awesome. I want you to do it with me. It's talking about the questions about life we all have. Why are we here? How did we get here? What's life about? How do I find meaning and purpose in my life? It's the basic human questions, and we're talking about them from a Christian perspective, and it's great. Trust me. Come to 3. If you don't love it, quit.
That's awesome.
So nobody's quit.
So far, I mean, you're in week 4, so at least you've got of this go round.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. Nicky Gumbel was being interviewed. Apparently, he spent 30 years avoiding putting alpha online, thinking, hey, what works about alpha is that you're like in a living room, or you're in a small group in a church and you're eating a meal together. And so he thought it would not work, that sharing wouldn't be as profound. But there's something about being in Zoom where you don't have to learn a new group of people's names. They're all right there on your screen. So you can go, oh, Andrew Johnson. Oh, yeah. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing? So you don't have to worry about forgetting their name. You can eat whatever food you like. Like Zoom, you can be, you can have your suit and tie on, but be in your jammies, below the waist, and no one really knows. So it's actually, Nicky was super surprised that it turned out that the completion rate had gone way up going to Zoom rather than in person.
Yeah, I can't wait till this it continues to bear fruit, because at least early in the COVID era, maybe not as much now as things are getting closer to being back to normal, but everybody was bored. And they were just stuck at their house. And so their friends were like, hey, you want to be a part of this? And I was like, I got nothing else to do. Netflix is boring.
What else am I doing? I've watched everything on Netflix.
So, this is Alpha. I can't get that on Netflix. Maybe I'll check it out. So I hope it does continue to carry through. What would you say, Matt, to the person who has at least theoretically said evangelism is important, but they haven't so much put it into practice? What would your encouragement be to that person?
I think I'd just say prayer, care, and share. Pray for people and ask God to tell you who to pray for, and then find ways to care for them naturally. Like if it's a neighbor. And, like we've got these 2 houses of college students that live next door to us. And so we're about to bake them cookies and take them cookies as a way to get to know them and care for them. And then, the commitment to at some point when the time is right to be open to sharing our faith with them. So I think if you start praying for people, and that's a way that opens every door, like there was this guy who came to a Young Life staff meeting once, and his ministry was, can I pray for you? That was his entire technique. And this guy had led like tens of thousands of people to Jesus. And he'd walk up to you and he'd go, hey, I like to pray for people. How can I pray for you? And he'd like pull out his book and he'd write down, oh, come on, and like, no, really, I just like to pray for people. Well, my mom's really sick. Okay, I'll pray for her. And then he'd go back and check in with them. And he'd end up talking to him about his faith, and they'd end up meeting the Lord. And his whole big technique was, I just like to pray for people. And so pray for them, care for them, share your faith with them.
Man, head, heart, hands, in an entirely different aspect. It's. I think I'm going to have to now steal that. Thank you, Matt. You've populated many things now that I can do with prayer, care, and share. Since you were the guest on this interview, would there be anything else you kind of want to say as like a parting shot, or to whoever is watching and listening to this? I want to make sure you either do this or say this or are this as you move forward in Christ.
Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know. So one time I was in this. I just thought of this story while we were sitting here talking. Years ago, we were in this Young Life camp cabin, and we just heard the sin talk. And this kid comes up and he goes, I think that camp speaker said he thinks I'm going to hell. And I said, I think that's exactly what he said. And he said, well, then, and he goes, and you guys don't think that, do you? And I said, well, he didn't make it up. Like, he's just quoting the Bible. And he goes, well, then you guys can go to hell, and that camp speaker can go to hell, and God can go to hell. Blank you all. And he flipped us off, and he went running up the hill and disappeared. And the brand new Young Life leader, just graduated from high school with me, was like, big, strapping former quarterback. He's like, I'm going to go get him. And I'm like, no, just let him chill out. Just let him be. The gospel works. Just let it be. And so we do the cabin time. There are 9 other boys in the cabin, and we get done with the cabin time after this sin talk. And the bad news is bad news. And all of a sudden, the door bursts open, and here's this kid. His name's Chris Berg. He's an awesome guy. Door bursts open, and he says, and his tears are streaming down his face. And he says, I went up that hill back there behind the cabin, cussing you out, cussing Ryan out, cussing God out. And I got to the top of the hill, and I sat down, and I thought about the message, and I realized that if Jesus Christ is true and he's real and he made me for himself, then the person who's most hurt by me stealing my life from him isn't me, it's him. So I came back down here to figure out what it is that I need to do to stop stealing my life from God. I mean, the bottom line is that when the Holy Spirit starts to speak to someone and you just happen to be there to watch it, it's just amazing. And you want that for your life. You want to watch people discover God's love for them because it's amazing. And you were made for that.
Well, it looks like dust travels. So it got dusty in Matt's room, and it got dusty in my room. And I don't know if it's going to be dusty on your end too, viewer, but we have been made for this. We have absolutely been made for this. As disciples of our King, as sons and daughters of the King, he has sent us out to declare his goodness and his glory. Matt, thank you so much for letting me interview you. Thank you so much for sharing not just your ministry, but your heart and who God has continued to make you to be and shown himself through you. Now, this is going to go out across the world. So is there any public platform that you want to send people to? You haven't started writing books yet, so I can't say go read Matt's book. So is there any public platform?
I wrote a book on church history. So I'm kind of
true.
There.
That's true.
The only place I have I had a blog. I'm very inactive on thegospelside.com, but there was good stuff up there. It's just older good stuff. The other thing that I'm doing is I do this silly bit on Facebook called On the Porch with the Padre. So if you go look up, Matt Marino on Facebook, you can watch our silly On the Porch with the Padre videos. They're 5 minutes of unscripted encouragement.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time. Students, thanks for tuning into this interview as a part of our identity-based discipleship course. And I hope you enjoyed this as well as all the rest that we do.
Hey, thank you, friend.
All right, man. Okay, so this is me signing off for the interview, and we'll see you guys on the next interview.